Tumbleweed Affections by Clara Winslow. Colorado Territory, 1872. Rebecca Collins gripped the edge of the stagecoach window, her knuckles white as the vehicle lurched over another rut in the uneven trail. The worn leather seat provided little comfort after 3 days of travel, and her body ached with each jolt and bump. Outside, the vast landscape of Colorado Territory stretched endlessly before her, rolling plains giving way to the imposing silhouette of mountains in the distance. "First time out west, miss?" The older woman across from her smiled knowingly, her face etched with lines that spoke of years under the western sun. "Is it that obvious?" Rebecca attempted to smooth her travel-wrinkled skirts. "You've got that look about you, like you can't decide whether to be amazed or terrified." The woman chuckled. "I'm Martha Goodwin. Been making this journey twice a year for nigh on 15 years to visit my sister in Cedar Springs." Rebecca Collins. She offered a small smile. "And yes, I confess I'm a bit of both amazed and terrified." What Rebecca didn't confess was the desperation that had driven her westward. At 25, she had found herself in an impossible situation back in Boston, unmarried, orphaned, and with her family's mounting debts, leaving her nearly destitute. The advertisement seeking a schoolteacher in the small town of Cedar Springs had seemed like divine providence. The stagecoach rounded a bend, and Rebecca caught her first glimpse of the town and the valley below. Cedar Springs was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of weathered buildings lining a main street, with scattered homesteads dotting the surrounding countryside. "There she is," Martha said. "Not much to look at compared to your eastern cities, but she's got spirit." The coach rolled to a stop before a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Cedar Springs Hotel. Rebecca gathered her meager belongings as the driver opened the door. "Miss Collins?" A tall man with broad shoulders stepped forward. His face was partly shadowed by his hat, but she could see a strong jaw covered with several days' worth of stubble. "I'm Sheriff Daniel Hayes. The town council asked me to meet you." Rebecca accepted his outstretched hand, noting the rough calluses against her smooth skin. "A pleasure, Sheriff Hayes. I appreciate the welcome." "Call me Daniel." He took her carpet bag before she could protest. "Everyone does. Formality doesn't last long out here." She stepped down from the coach, her legs unsteady after the long journey. Daniel's hand shot out to steady her, strong fingers gripping her elbow. Their eyes met briefly, and Rebecca felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach. "Thank you," she murmured, quickly looking away. "Miss Collins will be staying with me until the schoolhouse apartment is ready," Martha announced, descending from the coach with surprising agility for her age. "My Henry wouldn't have it any other way." Daniel nodded. "That's kind of you, Martha. The town's been without a proper teacher for nearly 8 months now. The children have been running wilder than usual." "I hope I can meet their expectations," Rebecca said, suddenly conscious of her Eastern mannerisms and accent. Daniel's expression softened. "You'll do fine. Folks around here are just grateful someone answered the advertisement." As they walked toward Martha's home, Rebecca became acutely aware of the curious glances directed her way. Cedar Springs was clearly unaccustomed to newcomers, especially unmarried women from the East. "Don't mind them," Daniel said quietly beside her. "News travels fast in a small town. By tomorrow, they'll have found something else to gossip about." Martha's home was a modest but comfortable wooden structure at the edge of town. Her husband Henry, a silver-haired man with kind eyes, welcomed Rebecca warmly, insisting she join them for supper despite her exhaustion. Over a simple meal of beef stew and freshly baked bread, Rebecca learned more about the town and its inhabitants. Cedar Springs had sprung up initially as a mining settlement but had gradually transformed into a community of ranchers, merchants, and families seeking a fresh start. "The school's been standing empty since Miss Winters left to get married last fall," Henry explained. "Town council's fixed it up nice for you, though. Even put in some new books." "That's very thoughtful," Rebecca said. "When might I be able to see it?" "I can show you tomorrow," Daniel offered. "Need to check in with Doc Miller about his boy anyway. The schoolhouse is just down the street from his place." Rebecca nodded, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened at the thought of spending more time in the sheriff's company. She was here to teach, to rebuild her life, not to develop an infatuation with the first man who showed her kindness. Later that night, lying on the small bed in Martha's guest room, Rebecca stared at the unfamiliar ceiling. The sounds outside were different from Boston, no carriages rolling by, no street vendors calling out their wares. Instead, she heard the distant howl of a coyote, the soft nickering of horses from a nearby stable, and the occasional burst of laughter from the saloon down the street. She had come west for a new beginning. She only hoped she'd made the right decision. Daniel Hayes tied his horse to the hitching post outside Martha Goodwin's house, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair. He'd taken more care with his appearance this morning than usual, trimming his stubble and donning a clean shirt, a fact his deputy had commented on with a knowing smirk. He knocked on the door, and Martha answered with a knowing gleam in her eye that made him wish he'd sent someone else to escort Miss Collins to the schoolhouse. "Sheriff," she greeted him. "Come in. Rebecca's just finishing her breakfast." He stepped inside, hat in hand, to find Rebecca seated at the table. Her chestnut hair was neatly arranged, and she wore a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. Those eyes widened slightly when she saw him, and a faint blush colored her cheeks. "Good morning, Sheriff Daniel," she corrected herself. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting." "Not at all," he replied, suddenly conscious of his rough appearance compared to her refined manner. They set out a few minutes later, walking side by side down Cedar Springs Main Street. Daniel pointed out important landmarks: the general store, the telegraph office, the doctor's residence, and finally the small white building that served as the town's church on Sundays and courthouse when needed. "Most folks around here are good people," he explained, "looking to build something lasting. But we get our share of trouble, too. Mostly cowboys passing through after months on the trail, looking to blow off steam." Rebecca listened attentively. "And you keep order among them all?" "Try to," he said with a slight smile. "Some days more successfully than others." They turned onto a side street, and Daniel gestured toward a modest building set back from the road. "There's your schoolhouse." The structure was simple but sturdy, with large windows and a small bell tower. Next to it stood a smaller building, a single-room apartment that would serve as Rebecca's home. Inside the schoolhouse, Rebecca immediately went to examine the rows of desks, the chalkboard, and the small bookshelf with its meager collection. Daniel watched her move about the room, noting how she touched things gently, as if already caring for the space. "How many students will I have?" she asked. "About 20, ranging from 6 to 16 years old. Some can only attend when farm work allows." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. "And the town council, what do they expect of me?" "Reading, writing, arithmetic. History if you can manage it. Mostly they want someone to teach the children manners and discipline." Daniel leaned against the door frame. The last teacher, Miss Winters, also led singing in church and helped with the community socials. "I see." A slight frown creased Rebecca's brow. "I'm afraid I have a rather poor singing voice, but I can play the piano if there's one available." Daniel chuckled. "There's an old one in the church. Hasn't been tuned in years, but I'm sure the Reverend would welcome your attention to it." They moved to inspect her living quarters, a simple room with a bed, table, 2 chairs, a small stove, and a washstand. Someone had placed a vase of wildflowers on the table, and fresh curtains hung at the windows. "Mrs. Peterson from the general store brought those by yesterday," Daniel explained, nodding toward the flowers. "Her husband's on the town council." Rebecca touched the delicate purple blooms. "How thoughtful." "Folks are eager to make you feel welcome," he said. "Good teachers are hard to come by out here." She turned to face him, and Daniel was struck again by her quiet beauty. There was a strength about her, too, evident in the determined set of her chin and the direct way she met his gaze. "I should warn you," he said, "some of the older boys might test you. They've had months of freedom, and they won't easily surrender it." Rebecca's expression turned resolute. "I've dealt with my share of difficult students, Sheriff Hayes. I may look delicate, but I assure you I can hold my own." Daniel believed her. There was steel beneath her refined exterior. He'd recognized it from the moment she'd stepped down from that stagecoach, exhausted but dignified after days of grueling travel. "I don't doubt that for a moment, Miss Collins." Their eyes held for a beat too long, and Daniel cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how alone they were. "I should let you get settled. School starts Monday, so you have 3 days to prepare." As they walked back toward Martha's house, they passed the general store. "Do you need supplies?" Daniel asked. "Mr. Peterson carries most necessities." "Actually, yes. I should stock my pantry before Monday." Inside the store, Rebecca was immediately approached by a plump woman with a friendly smile. You must be Miss Collins. I'm Sarah Peterson. We're so pleased you've come to Cedar Springs. She turned to Daniel with a knowing look. Sheriff, I see you're taking good care of our new teacher. Just doing my duty, Mrs. Peterson, he replied evenly, tipping his hat. While Rebecca selected basic provisions, flour, sugar, coffee, and the like, Mrs. Peterson chatted amiably about the town and its inhabitants. Daniel noticed how skillfully Rebecca managed the conversation, showing interest without revealing much about herself. When they emerged from the store, laden with packages, they nearly collided with a well-dressed man stepping onto the boardwalk. "Pardon me," the man said, tipping his hat. His eyes widened with interest as they fell on Rebecca. "You must be the new schoolteacher." "Rebecca Collins," she confirmed with a polite nod. "Thomas Blackburn," he replied with a slight bow. "I own the bank here in Cedar Springs." Daniel noticed how Blackburn's gaze lingered appreciatively on Rebecca. "Miss Collins has had a long journey, Blackburn. We should let her get some rest." The banker's smile didn't reach his eyes as he turned to Daniel. "Of course, Sheriff. I wouldn't dream of taxing the lady's strength." He turned back to Rebecca. "Perhaps you'll allow me to escort you to church on Sunday? I'd be honored to introduce you to the congregation." Before Daniel could interject, Rebecca answered smoothly, "That's very kind, Mr. Blackburn, but Mrs. Goodwin has already offered. Another time, perhaps." Blackburn inclined his head, accepting the gentle rejection with apparent grace. "I shall hold you to that, Miss Collins. Good day." As they continued walking, Daniel noticed Rebecca's thoughtful expression. "Something troubling you?" She hesitated before answering. "Mr. Blackburn seems quite influential in town." "He is," Daniel confirmed. "His bank holds mortgages on half the businesses and ranches in the county." He paused. "Blackburn's a widower. Been looking to remarry for some time now." "I see." Rebecca's tone was neutral, but Daniel detected a hint of wariness beneath it. "Just so you know," he added carefully, "no one expects you to accept unwanted attentions, no matter how influential the man." A small smile touched her lips. "Thank you, Sheriff. I'll remember that." By the time they reached Martha's house, Daniel had resolved to keep a closer eye on Thomas Blackburn. The banker had a reputation for getting what he wanted, one way or another. Rebecca's first day of teaching dawned bright and clear. She had spent the weekend moving into the schoolhouse apartment and preparing lessons for her new students. Martha had introduced her to several families after church on Sunday, and Rebecca had been heartened by their warm welcome. Now, as she rang the school bell for the first time, she watched children of various ages making their way toward the building. Some arrived on foot, others on horseback or in wagons with siblings. Their curious faces studied her as they filed into the classroom. "Good morning," she said once they had all found seats. "I'm Miss Collins, your new teacher." A momentary silence fell as 20 pairs of eyes assessed her. Rebecca returned their scrutiny calmly, taking note of each child, from the smallest girl with blonde pigtails to the lanky teenage boy slouching in the back row. "Before we begin, I'd like to learn your names," she continued. "When I call on you, please stand and tell me something about yourself." The morning progressed smoothly as Rebecca evaluated her students' educational levels. As Daniel had warned, some of the older boys seemed intent on testing her authority, whispering and passing notes when they thought she wasn't looking. During the midday break, as the children ate their lunches in the schoolyard, Rebecca became aware of a commotion. She stepped outside to find two boys engaged in a shoving match while others formed a circle around them. "That's enough," she called sharply, pushing through the crowd. The larger boy, whom she recognized as Thomas Blackburn's son Edward, turned with a scowl. "We're just having fun, Miss Collins." The other boy, Sam Miller, the doctor's son Daniel had mentioned, had a bloodied lip and tears in his eyes. "Fighting is not fun, Edward," Rebecca said firmly. "It's dangerous and uncivilized. You will apologize to Sam immediately." Edward's face flushed with anger. "My father says I don't have to listen to a woman who doesn't know our ways." Rebecca felt a surge of indignation. "Your father is not present in this schoolyard, but I am. And while you are here, you will follow my rules or face consequences." A tense silence fell as teacher and student locked eyes in a battle of wills. Finally, Edward muttered an insincere apology and stalked away. That afternoon, as the children filed out at day's end, Rebecca heard a knock at the schoolhouse door. She looked up to find Daniel leaning against the doorframe, hat in hand. "Heard there was some excitement today," he said. Rebecca sighed, brushing chalk dust from her hands. News travels quickly in Cedar Springs. Sam Miller told his father, who mentioned it when I stopped by. Daniel stepped inside. Edward Blackburn giving you trouble? Nothing I can't handle, she insisted, though his concern warmed her. Though I suspect his father may have some unfortunate ideas about my authority. Daniel's expression darkened. Blackburn's been filling the boy's head with nonsense since his mother died. Thinks money entitles them both to special treatment. Rebecca gathered her teaching materials. Well, he'll find I'm not easily intimidated. I've no doubt of that. Daniel's smile returned. I came by to invite you to dinner at the hotel restaurant. Figure you might be too tired to cook after your first day. The invitation caught her by surprise. Aye, that's very thoughtful. Just being neighborly, he said, though something in his eyes suggested more. Rebecca hesitated only briefly. I'd be delighted, Sheriff Hayes. The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Cedar Springs, which wasn't saying much by Boston standards, but the food was well prepared and plentiful. Several townspeople nodded or stopped by their table to welcome Rebecca and inquire about her first day. Is it always like this? She asked after the third interruption. Does everyone know everyone else's business? Daniel chuckled. Pretty much. Makes my job easier sometimes, harder others. Over roast beef and potatoes, Rebecca found herself sharing stories of her childhood in Boston, of her parents' deaths from influenza 3 years earlier, and of her struggle to maintain appearances while their debts mounted. I needed a fresh start, she admitted. Somewhere my family's fall from grace wouldn't follow me. Daniel listened attentively, his eyes never leaving her face. That takes courage, leaving everything familiar behind. Or desperation, she replied wryly. Maybe both. He reached across the table, briefly touching her hand. For what it's worth, I'm glad you found your way to Cedar Springs. The simple gesture sent warmth spreading through her. As am I. Their conversation was interrupted by Thomas Blackburn approaching their table, his son Edward sullenly trailing behind him. Miss Collins, Sheriff. Blackburn greeted them with a tight smile. I believe my son has something to say to you, Miss Collins. Edward stepped forward, eyes downcast. I'm sorry for my behavior today, Miss Collins. It won't happen again. The apology sounded rehearsed but sincere enough. Rebecca nodded. Thank you, Edward. I look forward to a more productive day tomorrow. My son misunderstood my meaning earlier. Blackburn continued smoothly. I assure you, I have the utmost respect for your position in our community. Daniel's expression remained neutral, but Rebecca noticed the tension in his jaw. That's good to hear, Blackburn. Indeed. The banker's gaze shifted between them. I wouldn't want any misunderstandings to color Miss Collins's impression of our town. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Enjoy your evening. After they departed, Rebecca released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I believe I've made an enemy. Blackburn doesn't like being challenged, Daniel agreed. But he's smarter than to openly oppose the town's teacher. Too many people want you here. Including you? She wanted to ask, but didn't dare. As they walked back to her apartment in the gathering dusk, Daniel's hand occasionally brushed against hers. Each brief contact sent a jolt of awareness through Rebecca, making her acutely conscious of his presence beside her. At her door, they paused. In the soft glow of her lantern, Daniel's features seemed both stronger and gentler. Thank you for dinner, she said softly. My pleasure. He hesitated, then added, Rebecca, about Blackburn, be careful. He's not used to being refused anything he wants. The warning in his tone was clear. And what does he want, Daniel? The same thing I do, he admitted, his voice dropping lower. But I suspect we have very different ways of pursuing it. Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and stepped back. Good night, Miss Collins. Rebecca watched him walk away, her emotions in turmoil. She had come to Cedar Springs seeking sanctuary, not complications. Yet here she was, barely a week in town, already caught between two of its most powerful men. With a sigh, she entered her small apartment, closing the door firmly behind her. Whatever was developing between her and Daniel Hayes would have to wait. She had 20 young minds depending on her focus and attention. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Rebecca's days were filled with teaching, while her evenings were often spent in Daniel's company. Sometimes they dined together at the hotel. Other times he would bring her books from his personal collection, or simply walk with her after school, discussing the day's events. Word of their growing attachment spread through Cedar Springs, as Rebecca knew it would. Martha Goodwin hinted broadly about wedding bells in the future, while Sarah Peterson seemed to have a convenient reason to visit the schoolhouse whenever Daniel was there. Thomas Blackburn, meanwhile, maintained a facade of cordial respect, though his eyes followed Rebecca whenever their paths crossed. Edward's behavior in school improved markedly, but Rebecca sensed the boy was watching her closely, reporting back to his father. One crisp Saturday in late October, Daniel arrived at her door with a picnic basket. "Thought you might enjoy seeing a bit more of the countryside," he suggested. "There's a spot by the creek that's peaceful this time of year." They rode double on his horse, Rebecca seated before him in the saddle, acutely aware of his solid presence at her back, his arms reaching around her to hold the reins. The physical proximity was both thrilling and unsettling. The spot Daniel had chosen was indeed beautiful, a small clearing beside a bubbling creek, sheltered by cottonwood trees whose leaves had turned golden with the season. They spread a blanket on the ground, and Rebecca helped unpack the food Martha had prepared at Daniel's request. "It's lovely here," she said, gazing at the distant mountains, "so different from Boston." "Do you miss it?" Daniel asked, studying her face. "The city, I mean." Rebecca considered the question seriously. "I miss certain aspects, the libraries, the concerts, the bustle of activity. But I don't miss the constraints, the endless social obligations, the constant awareness of what others thought." "And here, are you happy in Cedar Springs?" She met his gaze directly. "Happier than I expected to be." Daniel reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something." Her pulse quickened. "Yes?" "Blackburn came to see me yesterday," he said, his expression grave. "He's planning to propose to you at the harvest dance next weekend." Of all the things she had expected him to say, this wasn't one of them. What?" He wanted to make sure I understood his intentions, said it was the gentlemanly thing to do. Daniel's jaw tightened, wanted to know if I had any objections. Rebecca withdrew her hand. "And do you have objections?" "You know I do." His voice was rough with emotion. "But more importantly, I want to know if you'd accept him." The question hung in the air between them. Rebecca looked away, gathering her thoughts. "Thomas Blackburn represents security," she said slowly. "As his wife, I would never want for anything material." She turned back to Daniel. "But no, I wouldn't accept him. I've seen how he treats those he considers beneath him. I've heard how he speaks to his son. That's not the kind of marriage I want." Relief washed over Daniel's features. "Good, because I was hoping to ask that question myself." Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. "Daniel." He moved closer, taking both her hands in his. "I'm not a wealthy man, Rebecca. I can't offer you fine things or an easy life. But I can promise to respect you, to support your teaching, to build a life together based on mutual regard." "Are you proposing to me, Sheriff Hayes?" she asked, a smile tugging at her lips despite her racing heart. "I'm saying I've fallen in love with you," he replied simply. "And I'm asking if you might feel the same." Instead of answering with words, Rebecca leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Daniel's arms encircled her, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "I'll take that as a yes," he murmured. Rebecca laughed softly. "Yes to loving you. As for marriage, perhaps we could court properly first. Give the town something new to gossip about." "Anything you want," he agreed, stealing another quick kiss. "Though I should warn you, once Blackburn realizes he's lost, he won't take it well." "Let him try his worst," Rebecca said with newfound confidence. "I've faced greater challenges than a spurned banker." They spent the afternoon by the creek, talking of the future, of dreams long suppressed, of the life they might build together. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, casting long shadows across the land, Daniel helped Rebecca back onto his horse for the return journey. Rebecca Collins had come west seeking refuge, never expecting to find love. Yet here, in this rugged, beautiful land, she had discovered not only a new beginning but a man whose strength matched her own, a man who saw her not as a delicate eastern flower to be protected, but as an equal partner in whatever adventures lay ahead. As they rode back toward Cedar Springs, the setting sun painted the landscape in hues of amber and gold. Rebecca leaned back against Daniel's chest, content in a way she had never thought possible. The West had changed her, just as Martha Goodwin had predicted that first day. But some changes Rebecca reflected as Daniel's arms tightened protectively around her were very much for the better.